Welcome to episode 266 of Silver Lining for Learning. I never thought that I would get to say that sentence. None of us realized 6 years ago, when the pandemic shut everything down, that we would have this wonderful archive of 260-ish case studies of educational innovation and improvement across the world. And we're all grateful for the opportunity to be part of it. My co-hosts here today are Punya Mishra from ASU, Lydia Kao from the University of Toronto, Kurt Bach from the Indiana University, and Yang Zhao is traveling but may have a chance to join us at some point in this episode. So we've done different things on different anniversaries of the show, often inviting people who were involved with Silver Lining in the very early days to be part of it. But we've done something different this time, and that is to look at this as an archive that really has a very rich history and also that can be mined for different kinds of insights and strategies and heuristics. And I'll not make myself popular with other podcasters by saying that most podcasts don't do anything like this. Most podcasts, I think, are basically self-marketing, where the podcaster is marketing themselves as having some expertise and inviting a guest who markets themselves as having some expertise. But what they aren't typically is case studies that are detailed enough that people really get a look at how they might implement a similar innovation in a different context, which is one of the questions that we frequently ask. So I'm just really happy to be here. Those of you who aren't listening to the audio only, we are wearing swag that Lydia very kindly funded for us, a jacket and a hat that say Silver Lining for Learning. I can't wait to wear these in Vegas and have all the people fawning on me as I walk down the street. So, life is good. Life is good, even at a difficult time when you have a 6th anniversary. So I'll turn it over to one of my co-hosts, having rambled on for long enough to add my words to the archive that's still growing.
Kurt, you're muted.
I'll just add a little thing before my co-host jump in here. I'll say I was in Vegas yesterday at this time, and I wasn't wearing my swag. I apologize. My swag hasn't arrived, or arrived, and I didn't get the sign for it here in Bloomington. So it's in process somewhere. Maybe during the show it'll arrive, and I'll go put it on. So it looks good for those of you who are going to watch this episode later on. You guys look great. I'm glad to see it, and thank you, Lydia, for taking time to create such a wonderful design. So, Lydia, you want to talk about the swag?
I don't know what there is to talk about swag. It's just I like I went to the shop to see it, like, in person when it was made. It just as Punya said, it just feels really unreal to see this logo we've been looking at coming live. But yeah, and also I also can't believe the show started 6 years ago. And I know I keep saying this. I was a PhD student, a first year PhD student when this show started, and I keep listening to this every Saturday. It was during the pandemic. I felt this something that really grounded me, because I know no matter what happened, there will be like this show going on every Saturday. There will be a appointment that for me to attend to. So I really, really enjoyed listening to this show. And then later on to be invited to the show as a co-host, you feel like you've been enjoying this sitcom for these years. And one day the director call you, be like, "Hey, would you like to join us to act?" I was like, "Oh my goodness!" So it really feel thrill, unreal to step into the onto the stage. And yeah, thank you to all of you. And that one of my wishes when I was listening as a listener was like, I hope this show never ends. And I'm glad we're still going strong. We still have tons of shows scheduled for the coming months and hopefully years. So yeah, so that's my wish. And I will pass it on to Punya.
So now
Now,
I got to say,
correct.
first year PhD student in another country, in the UK,
In the UK, that's
and
right.
Yeah.
then traveled over here to Boston, to Harvard for a bit, and then traveled over to Canada. So you've been in 3 countries in the 6 years of our show, is my point. So and by the way, in the last 3 days, I've been in 3 different time zones, 3 hours apart. So I'm feeling a little jet lag here for today's show, but I'm very excited by seeing the swag here from Lydia and knowing that you've traveled in time with us from Europe to the Americas. So you were the find of the show. So I must say we've had 260 some shows, and there's been no better find than Lydia. And we're really privileged to have you join us. And I hope that at some point during this hour, you can comment on what it's like for someone, who was exploring and, different themes in educational technology for what you might do for a dissertation and did it, completed it, and here you are still, and now you're a new professor. What it's all like, what you've seen during the 6 years of our show has been pretty incredible, and what you've maybe been able to incorporate into your syllabi in Toronto as a result of participating in this show. It might be really great to get your perspective on it, but we do need to turn it over to Punya at some point. I'm keeping him waiting there so he can collect his thoughts because he's got lots of thoughts to share with us today. And we're excited to hear them. And I'm sure you will be after you hear from Punya. Why don't you take over?
Thank you, Kurt. Well, first of all, I just have this immense sense of gratitude for all of you. You know, Lydia, you joined, a few years later, but Zhao and Chris and Kurt, and then, Scott and Shuangye in the beginning, you guys have been part of every week for the past 6 years of my life. To me, that's testimony to our tolerance for each other, but I think more a respect for each other. I don't think this would have survived if for so long, like you said, Lydia, if it weren't driven by a common sense of curiosity and purpose that we share. And so a really deep sense of gratitude to all of you for being part of this. 6 years is a long time. And I can't think of, Chris, you have said this before, or I'm paraphrasing you. I mean, if you look at a lot of these NSF grants and center grants and so on, that's millions of dollars and they last 3 years. And what is left behind after it, I'm never really 100% sure. I mean, you can go back to, COVIS and Northwestern back in the 90s. I mean, nobody knows anything. Has there been any impact of that work? And it was great work, don't get me wrong. And so for us to chip in a few $100 a year, and to create this, and it also speaks to the technological infrastructure that we have that is often not valued. I think that we can create and share videos for free effectively, right? We can make this podcast for $15 a month. I mean, those kinds of resources and infrastructure that allows us to do that was not possible any time in the entire sort of gamut of Indian history, human the evolution. I mean, sometimes we take these things for granted. And I think that, I'll talk a little bit more about sort of the analysis and stuff that I did over the past week or two of the corpus of the stuff that we have done over this thing. But I think underlying all of that is this mutual respect and friendship and collegiality that brings us together, and this infrastructure, which we often take for granted. That we can just jump on Zoom and 4 of us are here we go, and my dog's lying here, and we can do this, right? And then in the next 2 hours, we can just share it with the world. Whether or not anybody watches, that's a different story. But that's okay. I mean, that's not why we do it. I think we do it for the value of the conversation. I think the guests who come on our show appreciate a chance to talk about the work that they've been doing and share it. It's a recognition in many cases of people who don't, and Chris, again, you have spoken about this, who don't get they often get the attention in the journal articles or the whatever written about them. And finally, this has been a great way for me to scratch my design itch. I am trained as a designer, but that's not something I get a chance to do. So the thing that I want to share first of all is over the past 6 years, I have created every week that we have had an episode, and some episode that we don't, which is like a holding, we are off for Thanksgiving or something, 280 unique graphic images. And when you put all of them together in one screen, that's what it looks like. That's 280 images. Every little one is one unique image.
This is Punya Mishra's art. It's going on sale after this show.
No, I'm actually thinking of printing this out as a poster. It'd be great, 6 years just to recognize and send it to each of us can have one copy of it. So, but that's been a honor for me to do. Like it's been allowed me to scratch that graphic design itch that I've always sort of had, and then to do that. So that's been my fun part in this the selfish part, which is I get to design graphics, on a very regular basis.
I will
I don't know if
point out
anybody
that
has any comments or thoughts.
McLeod sends his hello to all of us and his hugs, and he couldn't make it because he's on a plane right now. But he would love to join us for episode 300 or whatever later on. So he did say he'd love to join us if invited. Xiangye, I have not heard back from. Xiangye Chen, who from East China Normal University, was also part of Silver Lining in the early episodes. But it's like early morning every 2 a.m. for every day for her to join this or midnight. So it became impossible to keep coming. But she was with toothpicks under her eyes, keeping them open for us every week as a trooper. We've had various people as participants who are listening in every week for a while. When we hosted this as a live show with a chat, it's still a live show, but without the chat component. We may come back to that at some point. But yeah, we appreciate all the people who've participated in the show in the past as participants, co-hosts, as active listeners, as contributors on the email to us who offered us suggestions for shows that we could have. And we continue to take your suggestions. So please send us emails or give us a phone call. We'd love to hear from you.
There's
Anything
one
to add,
thing.
Chris? Lydia? Go ahead, Lydia. Yes.
There's one thing I want to add is that having been a listener, having been on the other side, it seems to be effortless. Like you guys put on these shows every Saturday. I just need to show up in that YouTube channel and converse with all of you. Now I'm in like behind the scene. I know how much work you all put in the past 6 years. Like Punya, not only you design these graphics, maintain the website, and contacting all of the guests, like all of you finding all of the guests. And these, as you said, Chris, earlier, these are not people who constantly market themselves. We need to find this quiet innovator, identify them and bring them to the front and celebrate them. And doing all of that scheduling gymnastics, we've done shows across time zones, and this is not easy. Like we know how now having a faculty, I know how hard it is to even schedule a faculty meeting where everyone can show up. So it's just incredible amount of work. It's certainly a labor of love. And so, yeah, I think it's just, I'm so happy that we're here 6 years.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things is I don't do much of the getting the guests, it's just a question of bandwidth. I do a bit of that. But having people like Kurt and Chris and Zhao and yourself who are going to conferences, meeting people, and always thinking of, oh, this could make a great guest. I think, some of my favorite episodes, Lydia, were like with the We Cool Little Kids, can never forget that. And the kids from Nepal and, things that way, which just stay with you because they are so special and unique and, so on. So I think that's a lot of that credit goes to all of you. So that's kind of cool. So Chris, do you want to add something before I jump into what I did over the past 2 weeks?
Well, I just want to lead into your description by commending you for doing it and by saying that I really think that this archive has a lot of the insights that can be mined from it, as well as a lot of clips that can be used in instructional settings, because we like to wave our hands a lot in instructional settings and make very broad pronouncements that are kind of like mom and apple pie in ed tech. Presenting the students with worked examples is a much more effective way of learning. And I think Silver Lining for Learning has a lot of those. And Punya has made yet another contribution, not only the contribution of getting insights out of the archive, but the contribution of a novel methodology for doing so.
Thank you. So this was, I think, almost exactly a week or 10 days ago. I started playing with Claude Code and Claude Cowork, and I said, this might be an interesting project. We have a 6-year anniversary coming up. Over the past 6 years, we have 200. We have missed. By the way, we have just missed recording one video in 6 years. Otherwise, we have archived video on YouTube for every episode but one where we forgot to hit record. That's it, which I think is a phenomenal record. We have had 500 plus guests from over 30 plus countries spread out across every continent, because I was like, first, Antarctica is not there. Like, nope, Kurt got somebody from Antarctica to show up for one episode. So we covered every continent on which humans live. The entire corpus of data, if you take all the transcripts, like every word that was spoken that's been archived on YouTube, it's 2.6 million words. That's a lot of words. The problem with YouTube archives is it doesn't identify who said what, which like Zoom transcripts do, but we don't have the Zoom transcript for everything, because we could go in and look at every comment that Chris or Kurt or Lydia and I or Sao have made. We could have done that if that was there, but we don't. That said, the question then is like, how do you take so much data and what do you do with it? How do you do the coding and the analysis? And I wrote a blog post, which I called Dissertation in a Day, because this is actually the amount of work that would go into writing a really good dissertation. And I effectively did it in one day. And I'm going to walk you the hosts, my other co-hosts know a bit about this already, but I think to share the process that I went through, but also sort of what the themes and ideas that emerged. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm sorry for those who are just listening. You might want to go on YouTube and watch this one if you want to look at the screens, but the link and all of that will be available. So, oops, wrong screen. That's the one. All right, so what you can see here is a website that, again, I created with Claude Code, and it says from the week the world shut down to the rise of AI and beyond, because that's sort of thematically how it sort of went. It starts with sort of a brief history of Silver Lining, the first email that Zhao sent to all of us, and then we met. And Chris, I will always give you like huge credit for, even at the time of COVID and school shutting down, you had the really great idea of calling this Silver Lining for Learning. And I think that a part of the reason the show has stayed on is because we didn't have a name which was like responding to the pandemic, because then that would have been very time delimited. This one is sort of an eternal. This will never go away. So, which was great. We've, thanks to Kurt's work, gotten a few awards because he's really good at sending in these nominations. So to recognized by AECT. So here's what we started. So we had 2.6 million words spread out over 264 episodes. How do we start the analysis with Claude? So Claude and I would get into this negotiation, like discussion, like, okay, we have this, what kind of thematic analysis can we do? And so we would figure out something, and then I would make the decision, like, okay, this is what we're going to do. So what we did was we removed, there are around 50 plus hosts reflect episodes where the hosts get together and we talk about broader meta themes and so on. I said remove those because those are not words that are coming or topics that are coming from the guests themselves, because we could do an analysis of just the host reflect. Actually, now that I think about it, I should have done that, and maybe that's this afternoon. Now, what we did was we took 50 episodes out of their entire corpus, but stratified sampling, as in like took equal numbers from across the years so that we wouldn't be randomly biasing one year or the other. And Claude went ahead and did a thematic analysis of it, came up with like 9 or 10 themes. Then I said, now go pick up another 50 and do this analysis, do the thematic analysis again. And then we compared the two sets of themes that emerged. And what was great was there was significant overlap in the themes, like almost 9 out of the 11 or something were almost identical or slight changes in words. So, which told us that at least from internally, Claude's internal perspective, there was consistency there. So then we end up with these 4 categories of themes with sub-themes, sort of, so what we call 4 categories and themes within them, so a total of 12. So we have things called the landscape, what conditions shape education, the vision, what should education become or look like, the enablers, what makes change possible, and the dynamics, how does change happen? So we have these 4, and you can see from the titles itself that that tells you something about the nature of the show, because these were the categories that we talked about, right? And within that, we have pandemic recoveries and so on. So I won't go into the details because all of that is on the website. I'd rather have so I'll walk through this somewhat quickly. Now you can go in, because of this analysis, we can go in and create these interactive graphics, again, all done in negotiation with Claude, where you could pick up a certain episode. It'll tell you what that episode is, give you a link to that episode so you can go to the website and watch it if you want, tell you what themes there are, and tell you what other episodes are related to that. Again, just a resource for you to look and explore the corpus of data that we have, the episodes that we have through different dimensions. Then how do the themes evolve? Now, this is really interesting. If you look at how the initial episodes, first year or two, we had a lot about the pandemic, and over time that sort of petered down. And then you see AI have a little bump here, a little bump there, and then it sort of takes over. What has stayed consistent is a focus on the themes around ethics and equity. Those have always been a steady drumbeat through the entire thing. They never drop down, they never blow up, but that also can tell something about the values that we as hosts are bringing to that conversation, because we never came into this with a plan, right? That's the other thing that has to be understood about Silver Lining, that the whole dang thing is emergent, and so on. So anyway, I could go on and on about this, but to me, there are 2 things here. One is sort of the corpus of data that we have and what are the themes that emerge. And I would love to have the other co-hosts talk about that, because I can go on and on. But also what it means for research, where something like this, which would have taken an advanced graduate student or some other person working on it, like a researcher, a year or 2 to dig through the data, to do the inter-rater reliability, to do the analysis, to come up with the code, to create these dynamic representations. I mean, look at this representation. This one looks at the themes as they go across time. So if you start at the beginning, so it says March 2020, the week everything changed. SLL launches March 2020, almost exactly 6 years ago. The schools close worldwide. Pandemic response dominates the first episode. But then you can see how those things change over time. The pandemic takes hold by September of 2020. By January of 2022, almost exclusively, we are talking about the pandemic. And its consequences and its implications and so on. Now, here is an interesting shift. Without the data, we would have not realized. This is sort of the 2022, late 2022, things are kind of flat. Now watch this shift. You see this really tall bar. That's not the pandemic, that is crisis and conflict. I didn't know this, but there was a whole patch around 2023 where we talked a lot about Ukraine, we talked about Afghanistan, we talked about crisis in educational systems, not directly related to the pandemic, because the pandemic scores are really low, which I think is like super interesting, not something I would have recognized without looking at the data. So the analysis has revealed certain things. The other thing that the analysis has revealed to me is that when we talk about AI, is the least connected to the other themes. All the other themes, they have overlaps with each other. AI seems to be sort of on its own. And I think that's a problem for us. That's a problem, which means that we are talking too much about the technology, not the technology and its implications for equity, maybe, or its implications for systems change and so on. I think those are happening, but not maybe at the extent they should be. So I'm going to stop now with one final thing, that almost everything that I did to build this is freely available to anybody and everybody in the world. Every transcript, downloadable. Every piece of script written, downloadable. Details of the methodology, downloadable. Everything is here. You can download them individually. You can download the whole thing in one zip archive, and you will have everything that was done to build and develop this analysis. Which is because partly is because from the point of transparency, because at the end of the day, AI is a black box. So though there was a lot of negotiation and discussion, at the end of the day, it's like when I throw data at SPSS and it spits out a result, I have to trust SPSS. But the best way to trust is to actually get another human to do it, take their decisions, and see if we end up in the same place. So from that point of view, we have made this completely freely available to anybody in the world. Because again, we don't own it. These are conversations people have had freely with us, willingly with us, and they are publicly available on YouTube and other places. So I will stop with that and just open it up to thoughts, comments, questions, discussion. I think this issue of what this means for research, what this means for graduate training, I think is a huge one. I'm going to pause there and let.
So you're right. We have to ask what it means to different stakeholders, different audiences. And maybe we provide some guidelines eventually about how different people might use this site, or maybe write a paper about the potential uses. So there'll be different uses from an instructor who's creating a syllabi for the field of educational technology or learning technology, or something related to policy and education. So this would have different meanings to someone writing a grant, about the current topics in the field, or policymakers, or grant administrators, but also to potential students who are trying to discover, high school students who are exploring a field might discover the field of learning technology and say, this is something I might want to, potentially, make a contribution, or, major in eventually. So potential students, laypersons, people who just want to find out what this field is about, might just explore different timelines here and different topics, and, find topics they didn't realize even existed in a field that even existed, to parents that could talk to their children about this field. I mean, when this is an educational document, what you've done here is provide something that's really, really, really unique. And so the researchers, who are looking for, research gaps, something in the literature that they might want to explore, and they might want to show to their team. They might want to show some of these visualizations to their research teams, and have just a general discussion about potential research in different topics that we have had on the 260 plus different shows, or 210 shows, 215 shows, not counting the 50 that were host reflect. So that's, just thinking about the audiences and stakeholders and the uses of the data that you've provided. I mean, it's just fascinating. It provides a whole new meaning and purpose to doing Silver Lining for Learning. It's not just having the show each week and chatting amongst ourselves. It's the potential that each show then has to connect to other shows, or to spin off from other shows into new themes and topics that might be explored. So it becomes an active, emerging, dynamic corpus that we can use and others can use. So I think Chris is going to jump in here. Chris.
Well, building on what you're saying, Kurt, I've been reflecting on the changes in the context of education across the world that have taken place over the 6 years. I'm now 78, so I can divide my life into 13 6-year periods. And without using Claude, I can tell you that this 6 years has got to be at the top in terms of the amount of change, positive and negative, that's taken place in the world's context. And a lot of it has been positive, especially for global South countries. The pandemic forced everyone across the world to make investments in online infrastructure that have persisted to enable, when we don't want to travel, for example, to the other part of the world to give a talk, we can sit down at home and use Zoom, and they're all over it. They've got the infrastructure. The outside of ed tech, but within tech, advances in solar power have dramatically changed what can happen in remote villages across the world, and the access that marginalized populations can have to electricity and to the internet and to a lot of the other things that come with that. And even AI, if you think about it, what Punya did could be done by any highly dedicated and intelligent individual who was willing to invest the time to learn how to do it. And before what Punya did, and he highlighted this in what he talked, it would have taken, $100,000 of funding and some really smart graduate students, which of course Harvard and similar places can draw on, but the global South, not so much. So that's a leveler potentially that we're just starting to see that I think can be pretty dramatic as we look at year 7 in terms of contrasting the global South context to the global North context. So I think it's been a particularly momentous 6 years on both the upside and the downside. And now we'll see where all of this leads us.
Lydia, before you jump in, I just want to just build on something that I've been thinking about, having the transition that happened for me like a month ago in my head. We've been all using AI for the past, since it came out. I've been writing about it even before, and I know, Chris, you've been writing about machine learning and large language models and stuff like that forever. Working with Cowork scared the heck out of me. I have a Claude skill now that somebody in Australia, Leon Furs, built, which I then shared it widely and freely on GitHub. I got it, modified it for myself. So let's say, Kurt, you're working on your next book. You have a huge, massive Microsoft Word document, 80,000 words. You put it in a folder, you point CloudWork to it, and you give it that skill. It's the book editor skill. It will go in, read the entire book, read all in quotes. Like, it's not doing any of that we know that, right? But it's the output that I'm talking about. Not just in sections, but compare. It'll give you a 10 to 12 page formatted document talking about its strengths, the weaknesses, things that you could do to improve, and so on. Not just that, it will make a duplicate of your Word document and track changes. Not just changes at grammatical and stuff or phrasing stuff, but also saying things like, oh, in chapter 6, you mentioned this in chapter 2. This might be a really good place to refer back to it to build coherence. And I am thinking that kid who is graduating from college in next year, who wants to work for Simon & Schuster and be an editor, end up being a big editor in Random House, they're not going to be hired. Right? Because this model, I'm not saying it's doing a perfect job at all, but it is doing a job of an intern at a pretty advanced level. And I called my kids up and I said, I don't know what the future holds for you, but I am scared. Because the analogy that I've given is, when if you look at, Lydia, again, we are all aging ourselves here, but if you look at like early 90s when Clinton was president, when he signed NAFTA, that's what opened the sort of globalization. That's what in the Midwest, where I was for so many years, you can see the industrialization completely fall out, right? And what did we tell people then? We said, no, that dream that you could graduate high school and walk into a factory, get a union job, those days are gone. Go to college, go 4 years of college. And what I am seeing here, and this is just the beginning, is that 4 years of college, you're not going to get job. I don't know what it's going to mean for the economics, for the politics, and so on. But I'll tell you, I am both excited by this technology, but I don't think we are paying enough attention to the broader socioeconomic devastation that could come from this. Because we live in a country in the United States, Canada, Lydia, you are sort of protected because you have universal healthcare. Here, healthcare is deeply connected to the jobs you have. You don't have a job, you don't have healthcare, right? I mean, we have destroyed the social safety net, and we are entering a world where there will be much fewer jobs for beginning people. And what it means, I mean, like, think about how much of our money used to, like, universities, graduate assistantships. If I can do this in a day and it costs me $100 a month, that's what I'm paying for Claude. I'm paying the $100 a month level. I mean, there are sort of, here's the positive from Silver Linings point of view, which means we can go on for 6 more years because these changes are going to happen, and we're going to talk about what does it mean for education and learning. But there's a part of me which is also extremely, I think we need to have some episodes which talk about sort of labor change and broader social implications of the tech that we often haven't. We have focused on sort of learning spaces, but I think there are significant implications for education going forward that we need to talk about. Anyway, I went on and on. Lydia, thoughts, comments?
Yeah, absolutely. We already see that happening. Speaking with a couple of friends in the corporate world, they're already telling me that they're just the start of the disappearing of the entry-level jobs. And because most of the entry-level job can, to a certain extent, be done by AI in such a manner, and the medium tier, like seniors, just need to vet these AI output. But these seniors have, years of experiences to develop these critical skills to like judge AI output, but the entry level people don't have. So we kind of get stuck in the vicious cycle. The less you have, the less you have. Kind of like how poverty kind of build up. So I think thinking about society as a large and the future economy, there are definitely a lot of uncertainties. And I think like this transition is going to be really painful. And then I think it has to be done really mindfully. On the other side, for education, I feel like Punya, like you did this, I asked you earlier about, you said you spent a couple of days doing this, and then you proposed a really thought-provoking notion of a one-day dissertation. I was reflecting on this. I was wondering, like, okay, if now thinking myself back as a first-year PhD, now I have Claude. Let's say I'm proficient in Claude Code, and can I do this in one day? And I think, if I'm honest with myself, I don't think I can. It's because I haven't developed enough that research skill as well as the judgment to be almost a partner with Claude in this sense. You said you like kind of negotiate a lot with Claude, thinking about like interoperability with Claude, thinking about how these different themes intersect, thinking about like the semantic mapping. I just don't think I will be skilled enough first to to judge whether this idea is a good idea. Second, to have like a lot of negotiation is not like, as you said, it's kind of evolving. It's not like you have a plan, this is what you're gonna do. And then so I don't think I have those implicit knowledge to guide AI in a way that's fundamentally gonna give a really good output. So one thing I know for sure is AI doesn't replace learning, but how learning will happen, I think it's going to be really, really different. Like we know learning, like we've been talking about this forever in Silver Lining, but learning, it's like a learning can't happen the same way that's happening right now. Like one teacher in front of the classroom, like teaching, like student learning, teacher teach by talking, student learn by listening. That gotta change, and there's going to be a lot of changes. And I think as educators, maybe the best thing we can do is to think about how we can make learning like not just like more efficient. I think there's so much narrative about making learning more efficient. Now we can cram more information into students' heads in a shorter period of time by giving everyone a tutor. But Chris been talking about this a lot, like these judgment skills. How can we cultivate judgment skills that's actually going to make a difference and actually allow us to partner with AI to do better things in the world?
Painful. These times. She says, it's going to be painful. I'm like sitting, it's been painful already. If it's going to be more painful, geez, there's going to be a lot of young people here who already are being doged by, from their different employment possibilities, and now AI is going to doge them again, yet again and again and again. I mean, Chris and I are at a space where we're old enough that, if we get doged, it's okay. But so anyways, there's been a lot of pain. There's going to be more pain, and maybe we could have some shows about young people and how they pursue entry level positions and what differentiates themselves from others, so that they do get employed and they start their career paths in a positive light. Or maybe we need to have counselors on this show, career counselors. We had Vanessa Denon on last year talking about the journals that she edits, but she's now a career counselor, helping young people out. And there might be others. She's decided that that's going to be part of her path as a faculty member in the field of learning technologies. And that maybe there's others that we could bring in for a show on that to make it less painful and to give people a plan. That's one thing that we might do in the coming year. Another is, as Chris said, as Punya may have said, get a economist, a sociologist, educational sociologist on this show, or a number of them, and you all might know them. I'm trying to think of some, but if you do, that would make a lot of sense to get them on the show. The other thing that had me thinking is the one-day dissertation idea, just like Lydia. Could I do a one-day dissertation? I have done a one-day paper. I was asked to help on a paper once where one of my doc students who had just finished her dissertation was struggling with the paper. We got it in and got it out and got it published in Tech Trends. So I have done that. A one-day dissertation, on the other hand, might be more difficult, but I have to reflect back, and Chris probably does too. Having been on 152 dissertation committees, a third of them being advisees, each one is a book, and I've edited each one of them. I've acted like a book editor. I don't do light touches, and so those things that I was spending a huge amount of time on could now be done by AI, and it could free me up to do other things when I'm reading these gigantic dissertations. And I've just read a few long ones during break this past week. So, what is writing? What is editing today compared to what writing and editing was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago? Or what our definition of writing might be changed dramatically. What it means to do writing research in this age of AI augmented, AI supported, AI amplified skills, becomes a huge amount of possibilities for researchers, a huge amount of possibilities for academics who want to explore the application of different AI tools within their methods of training and counseling their advisees and their students who are planning to do dissertations. But anyways, the one-day dissertation, not yet. I don't think it's possible yet. But what amount of work goes into a one-day dissertation that you can claim that's your own? Not a whole lot, I think. I'll stop there.
So I'm struck with cycles. History is all about cycles, and the more things change, the more they stay the same. 6 years ago, we were starting out at a time when people had to stay home because it was too dangerous to go out and because there were prohibitions about going out. So here we are. We don't have a virus, but we have the cost of travel going through the ceiling because of the oil price issue. We have showing up at the airport 6 hours early because of the political turbulence issue. And what scares me is there will be domestic terrorism as retribution. It's not whether, it's just where and when. And so that's the danger beyond the cost. and the inconvenience. That's the danger. So we may be going back to, again, having to rely more on online for a different set of reasons, but an equally compelling set of reasons. And of course, all the people who claim that face-to-face is the only valid way of interacting will once more be knocked back on their heels by the fact that the world doesn't respect that point of view.
So, Lydia, I think the point that you made about expertise in doing this was definitely right. Um, uh, Me 20 years ago might not have thought about stratified picking these and then asking questions of like, oh, this number looks higher just because that word was spoken more doesn't mean thematically it connects. So how do we normalize across, so do we just focus on three themes? Because if you get like 30 themes, then it's just noise after a point, like too much, so there were lots of decisions that way. A lot of decisions, even after the analysis was done, was about how this should work, like how each of these interactives should work. And that's where my interest in graphic design and UX and usability, like, even simple things like when this video plays, like this bars bounce up and down, and then the message comes. If the message changes very quickly, I won't even notice that the message changed. And so what it would do, it would fade in after a little bit of a gap. Now, I would never know how to code that. But I could just say, like, okay, when this message, so I would take a screenshot, I would put an arrow and put a scribble, and I'd say, this message should come in, fade in a little after everything else has happened so that it's salient, like that change is salient to the eye of the viewer. Like even things that way, right? We're all being sort of figured out. But yes, expertise. I think that if somebody without that same level of care for interface design and font and typography and space and all of that would take very different decisions on this for sure. I'm pretty confident of that. So yes, I think, and that gap that you're speaking about, where when you're not hiring people for the beginning jobs, you're not giving them an opportunity to develop that expertise. I think is going to be interesting. Like, and how we solve that problem, I don't know. The other thing is, I think it changes the nature of the work as well. You start doing a lot more managing of stuff than actually doing stuff. I can have like three different projects running at the same time working with Cloud Code, and I'm managing the outputs and I'm saying, no, I don't like this, change this, then I go back to the other one. So I'm doing five things at a time. So in terms of workload, it actually goes up in some weird way. So it's a living experiment going on right now in my life, with what this means.
Absolutely. It is worrisome, like in the way that like the people, like the rich people, not in terms of money, but like people who know more, have more knowledge, expertise, they can get more done. It begets more, and as the entry level people, when they don't have as very much experience, it's hard for them to like develop that kind of expertise. I wonder if we could also think about, maybe invite future guests to think about how can AI, not necessarily AI, maybe just like shift a focus in terms of education, that to get people to develop more of these kind of judgment skills. And recently, a colleague of mine, Boris Stipe from University of Toronto, he introduced me to this notion of epistemic taste. I was really fascinated by this notion of taste, because taste is not something like, it's something that is just so embodied, that is not, you cannot pinpoint that to a certain like aspect of something. It's kind of evolved like everything, like not cognitively, effectively, emotionally, like even physiologically. There's a lot going on there. And I feel like we need to help our learn to develop this like a taste about knowledge, taste about like what is useful, what is helpful, what is going to serve people. Like Tony, I feel like was you doing this tinkering with the Claude, there was a lot of like taste, like judgment in that, like, oh, like this doesn't look good, this need to fade a little bit slower. But those things are so nuanced, and I think only an experienced human can pick that up, and who have that kind of sensitivity, have that taste to pinpoint that. I think that's what's really going to set people apart. people who have that kind of taste and judgment, people who don't, and how do we cultivate that in people? And I think that's going to be a really important question.
Punya, I wonder if there's anything in your presentation that you kind of skipped over. It seemed like at the end there was items that you skipped over. I'd like to have you explain them to the listening audience, because I'm going to show this parts of this video to my class on Monday. Is there
They
any
can go
other?
to the website, right? I mean, so that's one of the things. It's just punyamishra.com/SLL.
This is, yep.
So all of that is there. Now, here is okay. So remember at the beginning, I said that, oh, it might be interesting to look at just the host reflect.
Mm-hmm.
While we were having this conversation, I sat with Claude and I said, something we never looked at just the host reflect. And we had a back and forth. And I said, do you want to compare host reflect to all of them, or do you want to compare them to all the transcripts minus the host reflect, so that it's a genuine comparison, blah, 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 blah. All right, we have the answers. When the hosts reflect without guess, the conversation gravitates towards big disruptive forces: pandemic, geopolitical crisis, and the AI wave. These are the sense-making episodes of the host process seismic shifts in education. Conversely, guests carry the ground level work. So they talk a lot more about global perspectives and innovation for practitioners. So thematic richness comes from this complementarity. Hosts as macro sense makers, guests as carriers of lived practice. While we were having this conversation, right? I mean, so that's like, that's how insane this tech is. Like, it could go in and immediately, because it had the codes, it could just draw them up. It's drawn up a nice little table, thematically connected, and it's given these numbers and done this first pass and given me this conclusion, even while we were speaking. And I was engaged in this conversation. So it's not like I was sitting there 100% focused on this. It was literally taking a few quick decisions about what we should focus on, and that. And so that's, if anything, I would say, Kurt, to your students is, I mean, this is what I told my kids, and this is what I told my graduate students: pay $20 a month, get it, play with it, because this is going to determine, if you're in the beginning in any career, this is going to determine how your work is done. My daughter works in business data analytics. My son works in similar spaces, and their jobs are transformed because of this. I know it. And if they are not on top of it, they won't have a job. I'm pretty sure of that.
I will play that for my students. $20. Punya Mishra recommends that all of you.
I mean, it's $120 a year that
Yeah.
you're investing in yourself,
Yeah.
and
No.
and try it. Just try it. Without that, I mean, I just go ahead and try things, and sometimes they fail. Okay, fine. But you'll surprise yourself by things that you can do with this. Chris?
I want to push back a little bit on what the real issue is with young people. What young people have been prepared to do by our education system, unfortunately, despite all of our efforts to the contrary, is to take very well-defined problems and apply a recipe to it. And so it's not surprising that AI, because it can do the recipe faster, if not better, at least adequately, is putting that at risk. So I do a thought experiment where I'm with a corporation, and somebody comes in for an interview and says, I know that you do return on investment calculations every 3 months to report out to your stakeholders. I'm really good at doing those return on investment calculations and formatting it and putting it out. And you say, sorry, that train has left the station with Claude. But the person that sits there and says, your return on investments are going to go right through the floor because, price of oil is up at X, political disruption is at Y, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can help you figure out what to do with this problem that nobody's ever seen before. In other words, I'm not coming in as somebody who can follow a recipe. I'm coming in as somebody who can make up a response to a novel situation, they're going to hire that person in a shot. And what's more, that person will probably outperform a lot of the senior people that, again, are really good with recipes, but not so much with historically unprecedented events. So part of the problem is, I think, that young people have been ill-served by the education they've received, and that we've got to pivot in a hurry, as you know, Lydia and I have been writing about, and all of us have been writing about for some time, towards graduating people who can create knowledge as opposed to people who can follow recipes.
I just want to quickly jump in, like absolutely, Chris. And I really think that's the fundamental issue right now with education, that we are preparing children to solve these school problems. That's like really has the right answer or even the right approach to do things. And unsurprisingly, AI can mimic this, like creating these so-called learning artifacts. And but the thing is, if AI can solve all the problems in the world, it should have most of it should have been solved, right? We know the real problems in the world is not just to writing a hypothetical solution or plan. It's executing that, to working with real people. And if AI could solve these like wicked problems like climate change, poverty, inequity, we should have already seen some progress. But what we see instead was exacerbation of all of the problems above. So we know these are not AI problems; these are deeply human problems, and we need to prepare our children to solve these real world problems, not just school problem that has a right answer in the back of the textbook or has a rubric that they can just like strategize and follow. And I think that is a real problem in education.
I am looking at the time. We have 2 minutes to go. Who's introducing the next episode? Kurt? I have just a couple of quick 2 comments. First, this is the positive, which is Silver Lining will run on because the topics are never going to cease. We identified a bunch today. I think a few new directions that we could go in our conversations. And so I am hyper excited about that to continue this thing. One thing that has changed in my thinking in the last month, I mentioned one, which is the sort of sense of like, oh, wow, this is going to transform the job market in ways. And I think, Chris, you sort of really brought it beautifully back to what I think animates this series and animates the work that we do, is that how the way we have thought about education has been very narrow. And this is really driving whatever the right metaphor is, a truck through that and that gap, and making that very revealing. The other positive that I found is that too long since ChatGPT came out, we have thought about these technologies as being a chatbot. So you see, a lot of the rhetoric has been, can we create a tutor, which, you know, and we know that children hate that. I mean, learners hate sitting in front of a computer and then being, you know, a 4%, like most of the studies on these tutors and so on show that 4 to 6% of the students use it the way it is intended to be used. Most of them are bored and so on and so forth. What this has revealed to me is back to Pappert's original idea of these being tools for the imagination, right? And that I can build stuff with it. So I have gone back now in a lot of the talks that I do to something that I'd always sort of believed and have argued for in my own teaching and so on, is this Dewey's idea of this 4 primary impulses that children have for learning. So inquiry, construction, communication, and expression. And I think that if we look at this tool from that way, that's what I'm doing, right? This website that I've developed, this analysis that I've done, is an act of inquiry, trying to find out, what did we talk about? How did that change? It is an act of communication. I have to always constantly think about, how am I going to share it with the world? Is it going to make sense? I have to think of the audience. I have built something. And every decision that I took, I love this phrase, by the way, I'm going to run with that, the epistemic taste. I'm going to think about that, Lydia, that you just shared. I brought a lot of my epistemic taste to that. That's me in some way. If each of you would have done the same thing, the end results would have looked different, felt different, because we would have emphasized different things, taken different decisions along the way, right? Not saying one is right, one is wrong, is that taste piece comes in. And I think that's really powerful. So I think what this last month also has done for me is shifted in my head the conversation from, oh, there's a chat bot which I can interact with. That's going to be a big part of what people do. I get it. But for education, that this can truly be something to play and explore and build and share in ways that we couldn't have done before. We saw aspects of it with the web and with the computer and so on. This is at some level the next instantiation of those positive forces in education. And so,
Before I introduce the next show, I must ask this question, and we need to get this response from Chris. Back 6 years ago, did you really just come up with silver lining for learning on the fly, just pop into your head in 10 seconds and here it is and this is the show? Or was it something you actually came to the episode with? I got this idea and we'll see. Well, I'm not going to introduce it right away, but were you pre-planning that or just pop into your head?
My creativity largely is just pop into your head stuff that comes from a muse inside of me that I have no access to. So I'll take credit for generating the utterance, but it's a mystery to me where it came from.
There you go. There you have it. And that's why Chris has written so many books and authored tons and tons of research papers, because he has a muse. Multiple muses, probably. But I need to introduce the next show, I think. And we're going to be moving over to Korea next week at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. in Korea the next day, on a Sunday morning in Korea, on Saturday early evening here in the USA. We're going to talk about Week Without Walls, where students spend a week exploring other cultures such as Chiang Mai, Thailand, or Japan, Bali, Indonesia. Week Without Walls is an annual, often week-long educational program primarily for international and secondary schools, where students step outside the classroom for hands-on experiential learning. It focuses on community service, outdoor adventure, cultural immersion, to develop life skills like teamwork and resilience. Let me capture the end of this, the last sentence of this one. By exposing students to diverse cultures, fostering global perspectives, and encouraging them to make a positive impact through community service, Week Without Walls itineraries equip students with empathy and other skills and a mindset needed to thrive in an increasingly interconnected world. Now, the problem with this is the students are a little hesitant to appear on our show because they're worried about applying to become students in the USA if they appear on our show. So next week, we may have the instructors who are doing Week Without Walls. Well, we may not have the students. We're still working on that for next week, just to let you know. Again, it's been a great show. Punya, thank you very much. Punya, thank you for doing that. And Chris, thank you for coming up with Silver Lining for Learning 6 years ago from your muse. See you next time.